Admiral Kim Tae-ho stood on the bridge of his command ship, watching the screens with growing horror. 3 red dots showed where humanity's outer colonies had been just hours ago. New Seoul, Busan Station, and Jeju outpost all gone. The alien ships hung in space like dark metal sharks. Their hulls were black and smooth, covered in strange symbols that hurt to look at. These were the Welter Empire ships, and they had just murdered 130,000 innocent people. "Sir, we're getting a transmission," said Lieutenant Park from the communication station. His voice shook as he spoke. "Put it through," Kim Tae-ho said. His hands were tight fists at his sides. Main screen flickered and an alien face appeared. It looked like a cross between a lizard and an insect with 4 eyes and a mouth full of sharp teeth. When it spoke, the words came out in perfect human language. "I am Commander Texara of the Welter Empire. Your pathetic colonies burn behind me. Look at them and remember this moment. Submit to our rule or we will do the same to your home world." The transmission ended, leaving only silence on the bridge. Down on New Seoul, Park Jae-woo crawled through the burning ruins of his research lab. The air was thick with smoke and ash. His ears rang from the explosions that had torn through the colony just an hour ago. "The data," he whispered to himself. "Must save the data." He reached his workstation and grabbed the small storage device that contained years of research. Project Silent Thunder. The humans on Earth didn't know what they had hidden in these outer colonies. They didn't know what weapons Park Jae-woo and his team had been designing. Behind him, someone coughed. He turned to see his assistant, Choi Min-seo, trapped under a fallen beam. "Help me," she gasped. Park Jae-woo dropped the data device and rushed to her side. Together they worked to lift the heavy metal beam. Around them, the colony burned. The beautiful domed cities that had taken 30 years to build were now piles of twisted metal and broken glass. "Where is Sujin?" Cho Min-seo asked as they stumbled through the wreckage. "The school," Park Jae-woo said. "She was at the school when the attack started." They ran through streets filled with debris and bodies. The Welter bombs had been precise and cruel. They had hit the power stations first, then the communication centers, then the civilian areas. There had been no warning, no chance to fight back. At the elementary school, they found Lee Hyun-jin leading a group of children through the rubble. Her teacher's uniform was torn and dirty, but her voice was calm and steady as she counted heads. 32 children safe," she said when she saw her husband. "We lost 8 in the first wave." Park Jae-woo hugged her tight, feeling her shake against his chest. Behind them, the sky glowed orange from the fires that consumed their home. "We have to get to the evacuation ships," Sujin said. "The underground tunnels are still clear." They gathered the surviving civilians and made their way to the spaceport. The Welter ships still hung overhead like vultures, but they seemed content to watch the humans run. Perhaps they enjoyed seeing their victims suffer. In the underground hangar, Captain Nam Yun-ho was loading the last evacuation ship. His face was grim as he watched families climb aboard. "How many?" Park Jae-woo asked. 18,000 from New Seoul, Nam Yun-ho replied. "Maybe 2,000 from Busan Station, Jeju Outpost." There were no survivors. The numbers hit like physical blows. Jeju Outpost had been home to 15,000 people. Scientists, farmers, children, elderly couples who had come to see the stars in their final years, all dead. "Sir," one of the refugees called out. "What about Earth? Will they send help?" Nam Yunho looked at the frightened faces around him. These people had lost everything. Their homes, their friends, their entire way of life. He couldn't tell them the truth. He couldn't say that Earth's fleet was too small and too weak to fight the Velter Empire. "Earth will respond," he said instead. "They won't let this stand." As the evacuation ship lifted off, Park Jai-woo clutched the data device in his pocket. Inside it were the blueprints for weapons that could chain everything. Weapons that Earth's leaders had forbidden them to build. Weapons that were too dangerous for any civilized species to use. But now, as he watched his burning home disappear below, Park Jai-woo wondered if being civilized was worth anything when faced with monsters like the Velter. Back in space, Admiral Kim Tae-ho received the final reports from his scout ships. The alien fleet was massive. 300 ships, each one larger and more advanced than anything in Earth's navy. The Velter had conquered 17 other species in the past century. They were professional killers who had turned warfare into an art form. "Admiral," said his aide, Commander Lee Dong-wook, "orders from Earth Command. We're to return immediately. No engagement with enemy forces." Kim Tae-ho nodded slowly. Running away felt like cowardice, but he understood the logic. His small fleet of 30 ships wouldn't last 5 minutes against the Velter Armada. Better to preserve what forces they had for the defense of Earth itself. "Set course for home," he ordered. "Maximum speed." As his ships turned away from the burning colonies, Kim Tae-ho made a silent promise to the dead. This wasn't over. The Velter thought they were dealing with another weak species that would submit or die. They had no idea what they had just awakened. The evacuation ships arrived at Earth 3 days later, carrying the survivors and their terrible news. The galaxy's most peaceful species had just suffered an unprovoked attack that killed 130,000 innocent civilians. The refugees told their stories to anyone who would listen. They described the sudden attack, the helpless feeling of watching their homes burn, the casual cruelty of an enemy that killed for sport. On Earth, people gathered around news screens and wept for the dead. They lit candles for the lost colonies and held vigils in the streets. But underneath the grief, something else was stirring, something that had been sleeping for 100 years. Humanity had spent a century trying to be better than their violent past. They had built a peaceful civilization among the stars, trading with other species and sharing knowledge. They had almost forgotten what they were capable of when pushed too far. The Velter Empire was about to learn that some sleeping giants should never be awakened. President Choi Min-ho sat at the head of the emergency council table, his face carved from stone. Around him, the leaders of Earth's united government argued in heated whispers. Through the tall windows of the Seoul headquarters, he could see protesters demanding immediate war against the Velter Empire. "We must strike back now." General Park Sung-min slammed his fist on the table. "Every day we wait makes us look weak." "With what?" Admiral Kim Tae-ho asked quietly. He had arrived from the outer colonies just hours ago, still wearing his combat uniform. 30 ships against 300, It would be suicide. Dr. Yoon Hairai, the head of Earth's Advanced Research Division, cleared her throat. She was a small woman with gray hair and tired eyes, but when she spoke, everyone listened. There is another option, she said, but it requires a discussion that this council has avoided. For 30 years, President Choi Min-ho leaned forward. Speak plainly, Doctor. Project Silent Thunder. The room fell silent. Even the protesters outside seemed to quiet there. Jance. Project Silent Thunder was a name that appeared in no public records, mentioned in no speeches, known only to the highest levels of government. That project was terminated, said Foreign Minister Lee Kyung-soon. The Geneva Protocols of 2157 banned the development of those weapons. No, Dr. Yoon Hairai said softly. The protocols banned the construction and deployment of those weapons. They said nothing about research and theoretical development. She activated the holographic display at the center of the table. Images appeared in the air above them, blueprints for weapons that looked like nothing any civilized species would build. Ships designed not just to win battles, but to make the enemy regret ever starting the war. For 30 years we've been researching weapons too dangerous to test, Dr. Yoon Hairai continued. We told ourselves it was just academic exercise, insurance against threats we hoped would never come. President Choi Min-ho studied the designs floating before him. How long to build them? The manufacturing systems are already in place, hidden beneath the Pacific Ocean. Automated factories wait for activation. Codes that only I possess. We could have the first wave of new ships ready in 6 weeks. General Nam Jung-kai, the oldest person in the room, spoke for the first time. His voice carried the weight of years spent in humanity's last world war. I've seen what humans can do when we stop holding back, he said. I've walked through cities we turned to ash with our own hands. Are we sure we want to become those people again? The question hung in the air like smoke. Everyone in the room knew human history. They knew about the wars that had raged for thousands of years before humanity reached the stars. They knew about the weapons that had nearly destroyed their own planet twice. The Velter killed 130,000 civilians. Admiral Kim Tae-ho said they broadcast their intention to do the same to Earth. We're not becoming monsters. We're stopping them. Outside, the chant of the protesters grew louder. Families of the dead colonists had joined the crowds. They held pictures of the children who had died on New Seoul, the grandparents who had been murdered on Busan Station, the scientists who had been vaporized on Jeju Outpost. Park Jae-woo sat in the refugee center, clutching the data device that contained his research. Around him, other survivors shared their stories with reporters and government officials. His wife Soo-jin was helping organize medical care for the injured. A government aide approached him. Mr. Park, Dr. Yoon Hairai would like to speak with you. Park Jae-woo was escorted to secure facility beneath the city. The elevator descended for what felt like hours, passing through layers of rock and concrete. When the doors opened, he found himself in a laboratory that belonged in a science fiction movie. Dr. Yoon Hairai greeted him personally. Your work on quantum disruption theory, how complete is it? Park Jae-woo handed her the data device. Complete enough. We were 6 months from a working prototype when the attack came. She plugged the device into her workstation. Data flowed across dozens of screens showing equations and tests, results that made her eyes widen. This is beyond anything we theorized. She whispered, your team achieved quantum cascade resonance. That should be impossible. We had helped Park Jae-woo said the neutronium deposits on new Seoul created unique experimental conditions. We could test theories that would be too dangerous to try on Earth. Dr. Yun Harai turned to face him. How would you feel about weaponizing this research? Park Jae-woo thought of his burning home, of the children who had died in Soo-jin's school, of the casual cruelty in the Velter commander's voice. Tell me what you need. Meanwhile, in a secure bunker beneath Geneva, General Nam Jung-kai assembled a different kind of team. These were not the usual military commanders who led peacekeeping missions and humanitarian operations. These were specialists in a type of warfare that humanity had tried to forget. Captain Song Da-yun entered the briefing room with confident steps. She had spent 15 years studying historical naval battles, from ancient sea warfare to the space conflicts of the early colonial period. Her specialty was unconventional tactics that confused and demoralized enemies. Major Han Woo-jin arrived next. He was younger with sharp eyes that seemed to see through people. His field was psychological warfare, the art of breaking an enemy's will to fight. He had written papers on human conflict psychology that were classified at the highest levels. Gentleman, lady, General Nam Jung-kai began, you're here because you understand something that most people have forgotten. Humans are not naturally peaceful. We learned to be peaceful because we got very, very good at war. He activated the room's holographic display, showing star charts of Velter territory. Our enemy has conquered 17 species in the past century. They have superior numbers, superior technology, and superior experience in galactic warfare. What they don't have is experience fighting humans. Captain Song Da-yun studied the tactical information. Their victories show a pattern. They rely on overwhelming force and intimidation, quick strikes that break enemy morale. Exactly, General Nam Jung-kai nodded. They're used to fighting species that develop space travel through cooperation and gradual technological advancement. Species that see war as an unfortunate necessity to be ended as quickly as possible. Major Han Woo-jin leaned forward. But humans evolved differently. We reach the stars while still carrying the genetic memory of 10,000 years of constant warfare. Every human brain is wired for survival and conflict in ways that peaceful species can't understand. The question, General Nam Jung-kai said, is whether we're willing to use that advantage. The room fell quiet as the three officers considered the implications. They were talking about unleashing aspects of human nature that their civilization had spent centuries trying to control. Sir, Captain Song Da-yun said finally, with respect, they burned our colonies. They killed our children. The question isn't whether we're willing. The question is whether we can afford not to. Back in the government building, President Choi Min-ho made the decision that would change everything. Dr. Yoon Harai, you have authorization to activate Project Silent Thunder. General Nam Jung-kai, prepare Operation Broken Chain. We're going to show the galaxy why humans spent so long learning to be peaceful. As the orders went out through secure channels, automated factories beneath the ocean came to life. Weapons that had existed only in theory began to take physical form, and in training facilities around the world, humanity's most dangerous minds began to plan a war unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. The Velter Empire had awakened something that had been sleeping for 100 years. They were about to learn that humanity's greatest achievement wasn't reaching the stars. It was learning to control themselves. 5 km beneath the Pacific Ocean, lights began to flicker on in facilities that had been dark for 30 years. Water pressure at this depth would crush a human instantly. But the automated factories had been built to withstand anything nature could throw at them. Dr. Yoon Hairai stood in the control center on the surface, watching data streams flow across her screens. Each number represented years of theoretical research becoming terrifying reality. Assembly lines that had never been used started moving. Robotic arms that had waited decades for their first task began to build weapons that no ethical committee would ever approve. Quantum disruptor torpedoes are online, reported her assistant, Dr. Kim Young-hee. Viral nanobots are entering final assembly. The psychological warfare packages are. Dr. Yun, are we really going to use these? Dr. Yun Harai paused in her work. On her desk sat a photo of her granddaughter who had been visiting friends on New Seoul when the attack came. The little girl had been 7 years old, with a bright smile and dreams of becoming a teacher like Lee Soo-jin. Yes, she said quietly. We're going to use all of them. Park Jae-woo had been working for 3 days straight, surviving on coffee and determination. His quantum disruption research was being integrated into weapon systems that defied everything he thought he knew about physics. The equipment around him hummed with power that made his hair stand on end. The cascade effect is stable, he reported to the team of engineers surrounding his workstation. When these torpedoes hit a target, they won't just destroy it. They'll make the wreckage continue to break down at the molecular level for hours. How long until the effect stops? Asked Chief Engineer Ryu Min-jun. That's the beautiful part, Park Jae-woo said with a tired smile. It doesn't stop. The quantum cascade becomes self-sustaining once it reaches critical mass. Anything that touches the affected area becomes part of the destruction. The engineers exchanged worried glances. They were building weapons that could potentially consume entire solar systems if they malfunctioned. Are there safeguards? Ryu Min-jun asked. The best safeguard is never having to use them, Park Jae-woo replied. But if we do use them, the Velter will never attack another human colony. Meanwhile, his wife Soo-jin had been assigned to a different kind of project. The refugee center had become a coordination hub for families affected by the attack, but Soo-jin's real job was something else entirely. She was collecting stories. Tell me about your daughter, she said gently to an elderly man named Cho Young-soo. He had lost his entire family on Busan Station. She was a nurse, he said through tears. She stayed behind to help evacuate the hospital. The Velter bombs hit the medical center directly. 37 children died with her. Sujin recorded every word, every detail, every moment of pain. These stories were being compiled into something that would become part of Major Han Woo-jin's psychological warfare program. The galaxy would hear what the Velter had done, told in the voices of those who had suffered. In orbit around Earth, construction had begun on a new type of ship. From the outside, they looked identical to the vessels that had been destroyed at the colonies. But inside, everything was different. Admiral Kim Tae-ho walked through the corridors of the prototype vessel, accompanied by Captain Song Da-yeon. The walls were lined with systems that seemed to pulse with their own heartbeat. The entire ship is alive in a sense. Captain Song Da-yeon explained. The viral nanobots are integrated into every system. If the ship is damaged, they begin converting enemy attacks into raw materials for repairs. And if the ship is destroyed, the nanobots survive. They seek out enemy vessels and begin the conversion process there. Each destroyed human ship becomes a weapon that continues fighting after death. Admiral Kim Tae-ho stopped walking. That's not warfare, that's something else entirely. Yes, sir, it's what the Velter made necessary when they chose to murder civilians. Far from Earth, Velter intelligence Officer Kethron was conducting his own investigation. He had returned to the ruins of New Seoul, searching through the wreckage for information about human capabilities. What he found made his 4 eyes narrow with concern. Hidden beneath the civilian research facilities were laboratories that had clearly been working on military projects. The quantum resonance equipment was decades ahead of anything in Velter science. The materials testing showed experiments with weapons that violated basic principles of galactic warfare. These humans are not what they appear to be, he reported to his superiors via secure transmission. Their peaceful reputation may be a deliberate deception. The response came back quickly. Your concerns are noted but dismissed. No species achieves peace without first being weak. Continue your investigation, but do not delay our expansion plans. Kethron studied the burned laboratory around him. Scorch marks on the walls showed the pattern of weapons tests, equipment designed for creating, not healing. He picked up a data fragment that had survived the bombing, one of thousands that Park Jae-woo had been unable to save. The fragment contained part of a research log, a human scientist discussing the theoretical maximum destructive potential of quantum cascade weapons. The numbers made Kethron's translator unit verify the calculations 3 times before he believed them. These are not sheep, he muttered to himself. These are wolves pretending to be sheep. Back on Earth, General Nam Jung-kai was conducting the final briefing before Operation Broken Chain would begin. The room contained the most dangerous humans alive, specialists in forms of warfare that civilized species had never imagined. The first target is the Velter supply depot in the Rigel system, he announced. 12 enemy ships, minimal defenses, standard patrol routines. We will use this engagement to test our new capabilities. Major Han Woo-jin raised his hand. Sir, what are the rules of engagement? General Nam Jung-kai looked around the room at faces that had studied every human conflict in history. These people understood warfare in ways that went beyond tactics and technology. They understood it as an expression of human nature itself. There are no rules, he said finally. The Geneva Protocols applied to conflicts between humans. The Velter chose to step outside the boundaries of civilized warfare when they targeted civilians. We will respond in kind. Captain Song Du-won nodded slowly. What about prisoners? The Velter don't take prisoners. They kill or enslave entire populations. Why should we offer them courtesies they don't extend to others? The officers exchanged glances. They were crossing a line that humanity had drawn for itself a century ago. Once they stepped over it, there would be no going back. Sir, Major Han, Woo-jin said, the psychological warfare protocols include broadcasting human war documentaries directly into enemy neural networks. This will show them our complete history of conflict, the Battle of Stalingrad, the nuclear attacks, the resource wars. Everything. Do it. Let them see what they're really fighting. As the meeting ended, the officers dispersed to their ships and units. They carried with them weapons and tactics that had never been tested against alien enemies. They were about to discover whether human methods of warfare could translate to the galactic stage. Dr. Yun Hyeri watched the final preparations from her control center. The weapons were ready. The ships were armed. The most dangerous minds in human history had been turned toward a single purpose. She thought of her granddaughter, buried beneath the ruins of New Seoul. She thought of all the children who would never grow up, all the families that had been destroyed in a single afternoon of Velter cruelty. Activate all systems, she ordered. Let's show the galaxy why humans learn to be peaceful. The arsenal awakened, and somewhere in the depths of space, the Velter Empire continued their expansion, unaware that they had just provoked a species that had spent 10,000 years perfecting the art of total war. Captain Song Daeun stood on the bridge of her ship, the Indomitable, as it dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Rigel system. Around her, 11 other human vessels appeared in perfect formation. To any observer, they looked exactly like the ships that had fled from the Velter attack on the colonies. But appearances could be deceiving. Target acquired, reported her tactical officer, Lieutenant Bae Songwoo. Velter Supply Depot bearing 27 Mark IV. 12 enemy ships on patrol. Song Daeun studied the enemy formation on her screen. The Velter ships moved in predictable patterns, confident in their superiority. They had been conquering species for decades with the same basic tactics. Major Han, are you ready? She asked into her communicator. Major Han, Woo-jin's voice crackled back from the communications array. Psychological warfare package is loaded and ready. The moment we engage, every Velter in the system will experience the complete history of human warfare. Do it. The first phase of Operation Broken Chain began not with weapons, but with knowledge. Han Woo-jin's team transmitted directly into Velter neural networks, bypassing their communication systems entirely. Images flooded into alien minds. The Battle of Thermopylae, the Siege of Stalingrad, Hiroshima, the resource wars. 10,000 years of human conflict played out in the space of seconds. On the Velter command ship, Captain Zethover suddenly stumbled as visions filled his mind. Humans in primitive armor fighting to the death against impossible odds, cities burning, under nuclear fire, soldiers advancing through chemical clouds that would kill any sane species. What is this? He gasped, but his crew was experiencing the same overwhelming flood of images. Now, Song Da-yoon ordered. The human ships opened fire with weapons that defied Velter understanding of physics. Park Jae-woo's quantum disruptor torpedoes struck the enemy supply depot. First, instead of exploding, they seemed to cause reality itself to come apart. The station began dissolving at the molecular level, and the destruction spread to anything nearby. Impossible, breathed the Velter sensor operator. The quantum cascade is self-sustaining, it's not stopping. But worse was coming. The human ships released clouds of what looked like metallic dust. The viral nanobots moved through space like living things, seeking out enemy vessels. When they made contact with Velter ships, they began converting the alien metal into raw materials. Within minutes, 2 Velter patrol ships were being consumed from the outside in. Their own hulls turned against them, becoming part of the human attack. Captain Zethver tried to rally his forces. All ships engaged the humans, standard attack formation, but the humans weren't fighting a standard battle. Captain Song Da-hyun's ships moved in patterns that seemed random but were actually based on tactical innovations. From humanity's bloodiest conflicts, they used their own damaged vessels as guided missiles. They feigned retreats that led enemy ships into gravitational traps. They employed suicide drones that continued attacking even after their control ships were destroyed. They fight like madmen, reported the Velter tactical officer there, sacrificing their own ships without hesitation. No, Zethver realized with growing horror. They're not sacrificing anything. Every loss makes them stronger. He was right. When the human destroyer Relentless took a direct hit and began to break apart, its wreckage didn't just drift away. The viral nanobots kept the ship's weapon systems online, turning the debris field into a minefield that actively hunted Velter vessels. Major Han Woo-jin continued his psychological assault. He broadcast audio now, filling the Velter communication channels with sounds that chilled alien blood, human war songs, the screams of ancient battlefields, the voices of soldiers who had chosen death over surrender. We are the children of Earth, came a human voice over the Velter communication system. We are the descendants of 10,000 years of war. You killed our families, you burned our homes, now you will learn why we chose peace. The Velter ships tried to retreat, but Song Da-eun had anticipated this. Her formation shifted using tactics borrowed from Earth's naval history. Ships appeared where Velter sensors said they couldn't be. Weapons struck from angles that should have been impossible. The viral nanobots had reached the main supply depot. What had been a massive installation was now a growing cloud of metallic particles that sought out new targets. The Velter watched in terror as their own supply ships were consumed and converted into weapons that turned against them. Captain, the Velter communications officer shouted, "We're receiving a transmission from the humans." Park Jae-woo's face appeared on their main screen. His clothes were still dirty from the ruins of New Seoul, and his eyes held the cold light of someone who had lost everything. "I am Park Jae-woo," he said calmly. "You killed my neighbors. You murdered the children in my wife's school. The weapon Consuming your station is my design. It will continue to grow until there is nothing left of your presence in this system. Stop this, HFY demanded. We can negotiate. No, Park Jae-woo replied. You had the chance to be civilized when you chose to attack defenseless colonies. Now you get to see what humans are like when we stop being civilized. The quantum cascade had reached critical mass. The supply depot was gone, replaced by a growing zone of destruction that made space itself dangerous. Any matter that entered the affected area became part of the cascade, adding to its power. Song Da-eun's ships continued their assault with weapons that seemed to learn from each attack. The viral nanobots adapted to Velter defenses in real time. Quantum torpedoes that missed their targets created new hazards that persisted for hours. But perhaps most terrifying of all was the realization that this was just the beginning. The humans were holding back. Their ships carried weapon systems that they hadn't even used yet. Captain HFY made the only decision that might save his remaining ships. Full retreat, all vessels emergency jump to hyperspace. But the humans had anticipated this. 2. Song Da-eun's ships had been dropping quantum mines throughout the battle, creating dead zones where hyperspace travel was impossible. The Velter found themselves trapped in normal space with an enemy that fought like nothing they had ever encountered. One by one, the Velter ships were destroyed or consumed. Those that survived long enough sent desperate transmissions to their fleet. Commanders, the humans are not what we thought. Came one final message. They fight with weapons that grow stronger from their own destruction. They use tactics that no civilized species would consider. They sing songs while they kill us. The last Velter ship in the system was the command vessel. HFY and his crew watched their sensors as human ships surrounded them. The viral nanobots had consumed everything else, creating a cloud of hostile particles that pulsed with alien intelligence. Song Da-eun's voice came over their communications. You have one chance to live take a message back to your empire. What message? HFY asked. Tell them this was a demonstration. Tell them what they saw here is nothing compared to what we will do if they ever threaten human civilians again. Tell them that Earth remembers its colonies and we remember our dead. A single escape pod ejected from the Velter command ship just before the viral nanobots reached it. HFY and 2 of his crew members watched through the pod's tiny window as their ship was converted into particles that would hunt Velter vessels for years to come. The humans let them go, not out of mercy, but to ensure the message would be delivered. As the human fleet prepared to jump back to hyperspace, Song Da-eun looked at the tactical display one last time. The Rigel system was now a dead zone. Nothing would be able to use it for decades. The quantum cascade continued to expand. Slowly, a permanent reminder of what happened when humans were pushed too far. Major Han, she said into her communicator, how effective was the psychological warfare? Complete success, Han Woojin replied. The surviving Velter will have nightmares about human warfare for the rest of their lives. And when they try to sleep, they'll hear our war songs. Song Da-eun smiled grimly. Phase 1 of Operation Broken Chain was complete. The dogs of war had been unleashed, and the galaxy was about to learn why humanity had worked so hard to keep them chained. Back on Earth, Admiral Kim Tae-ho received the mission report with satisfaction. The Velter Empire had tasted human warfare for the first time, and they had found it far more bitter than expected. Prepare Phase 2, he ordered. It's time to see how their grand fleet handles a real fight. Supreme Commander Velthos stood before the tactical display in his flagship, studying the reports from the Rigel system with growing anger. In his 300 years of military service, he had never lost a supply depot. He had never had ships consumed by their own metal. He had never faced an enemy that turned destruction into victory. Impossible, he muttered, reading the survivor testimony for the 10th time. No species fights like this. His intelligence officer, Sub-Commander Krexner, approached cautiously. Sir, perhaps we underestimated these humans. Their psychological warfare capabilities alone suggest silence. Velthos's 4 eyes fixed on his subordinate. 300 ships, the greatest fleet in Velter history. We will crush these animals and make an example of their world. But deep in his mind, images planted by Major Han Woo-jin's transmission still echoed. Human soldiers charging through poison gas, cities vanishing in nuclear fire, species-wide wars that lasted for centuries without surrender. The Grand Fleet moved through hyperspace toward Earth like a metal storm. 300 vessels of war, each one capable of destroying a planet. Velthos had used this fleet to break 17 species. None had lasted more than a few weeks against such overwhelming force. Earth would be different. Though he didn't yet know why, Admiral Kim Tae-ho waited at the edge of Earth's solar system with a human fleet that looked pathetically small in comparison. 50 ships against 300. Any reasonable military mind would call it suicide. But these were not reasonable ships, and Kim Tae-ho was no longer fighting a reasonable war. All vessels report ready, announced his communications officer, Commander Lee Dong-wook. The nanobots are active. Quantum mines are deployed. Psychological warfare packages are loaded. Kim Tae-ho nodded. Around him, the bridge crew made final preparations. These were not the same humans who had fled from the Velter attack on the colonies. Those humans had been restrained by civilization and law. These humans had remembered what they were before they learned to be peaceful. Captain Song, are you ready? He asked over the fleet communication channel. Song Do-yoon's voice came back steady and calm, ready to show them what real warfare looks like. Admiral. In the depths of space, Park Jae-woo monitored the quantum cascade weapons from his engineering station. His wife Soo-jin was on Earth, coordinating with the refugee families. Their stories would be broadcast across the galaxy once this battle was over, ensuring that everyone understood what the Velter had done. Quantum disruptors are at full charge, Park Jae-woo reported. Cascade effect is stable, Admiral. These weapons will make the Rigel system look like a small firecracker. Understood. Major Han, begin Phase 1. Major Han Woo-jin activated the psychological warfare array, but this time he wasn't just targeting enemy minds, he was broadcasting to the entire galaxy, showing them what happened when humans went to war. The transmission began with simple words. We are human. We chose peace because we knew the cost of war. You have reminded us of that Cost, now we will remind you. The Velter Grand Fleet dropped out of hyperspace in perfect formation, supreme. Commander Velthos studied the human deployment with professional interest. The enemy ships were spread across space in what looked like a defensive pattern. Pitiful, he announced to his bridge crew. 50 ships against 300, this will be over in minutes, sir. His sensor operator reported the humans are transmitting something. Multiple frequencies, all directed at our fleet. Ignore it. All ships advance and engage. Show these animals how a real military force operates. But the transmission couldn't be ignored. It bypassed Velter communication systems and fed directly into their neural networks. Images flooded alien minds, not just battles this time, but the aftermath. Cities reduced to radioactive ash, entire continents turned into poisoned wastelands, billions of humans dead in wars that lasted generations. And through it all, the survivors kept fighting. They destroy their own planets rather than surrender, whispered the Velter tactical officer. They fight wars that kill 90% of their population. What kind of species does that? The kind that never gives up, Velthos realized with growing dread. The human fleet opened fire at extreme range with weapons that seemed to violate physics. Quantum disruptor torpedoes raced through space, and where they hit, reality itself began to break down. Velter ships didn't just explode, they ceased to exist in any meaningful way. But worse was coming. Song Dayun's ships released clouds of viral nanobots that had been improved. Since the Rigel system, these didn't just consume enemy vessels, they learned from each encounter, becoming more effective with every ship. They destroyed evasive maneuvers. Velthos ordered all ships scatter formation. But the humans had anticipated this. Their deployment wasn't defensive, it was a trap. As the Velter fleet spread out, they triggered quantum mines that had been placed throughout the system. Space itself became a weapon, creating gravitational anomalies that crushed ships or flung them into each other. Song Dayun's ship, the Indomitable, charged straight into the heart of the Velter formation. Her crew sang an ancient human war song as they fired quantum cascades that consumed everything in their path. She's insane, reported a Velter captain. She's using her own ship as a guided missile. No, Velthos understood with terrible clarity. She's using tactics that no civilized species would consider. She's fighting like her ancestors did. The Indomitable took massive damage from Velter fire, but instead of retreating, Song Dayun ordered her ship to ram the enemy flagship. At the last moment, she triggered the ship's self-destruct sequence, but this wasn't a normal explosion. The viral nanobots had been programmed to survive the destruction and seek out new targets. As the Indomitable died, it gave birth to a cloud of metallic particles that hunted Velter ships with mechanical patience. Major Han Wujin's voice echoed across the battlefield, speaking in perfect Velter language. Captain Song Dayun dies as her ancestors lived in battle, protecting her home, ensuring her enemies remember her name. The psychological effect was devastating. The Velter had never faced an enemy that turned their own destruction into victory. They couldn't understand species that chose death over defeat. Park Jae-woo activated the final weapon, the quantum mines throughout the system. connected, creating a cascade effect. That made space itself dangerous. Hyperspace travel became impossible. The Velter fleet was trapped in a system that was actively trying to kill them. Fall back to minimum safe distance. Velthos ordered. Regroup, for his words were cut off as viral nanobots reached his flagship. The proud vessel began to dissolve from the outside in, its own metal turning against its crew. Velthos and his command staff evacuated to escape pods, watching their ship become part of the human weapons system. Around them, the Grand Fleet was being systematically destroyed. Human ships fought with tactics that prioritized maximum enemy casualties over self-preservation. They used damaged vessels as weapons. They created dead zones that would persist for decades. They fought as if every battle was the last battle their species would ever fight. "Sir," his communications officer reported from the escape pod, "we're receiving a transmission from the humans." Admiral Kim Tae-ho's face appeared on their small screen. His expression was calm, almost gentle, but his eyes held the cold fire of someone who had lost everything and found peace in vengeance. "Supreme Commander Velthos, I am Admiral Kim Tae-ho of Earth. You killed 130,000 of my people. You burned 3 of our colonies. You threatened our home world." "We can negotiate," Velthos said. Desperately, "there must be terms." "No terms, no negotiation, no mercy. You wanted to show the galaxy how a real military force operates. Consider this your lesson." The quantum cascade reached critical mass. The dead zone expanded to encompass the entire outer system. Any Velter ship that tried to escape was consumed by the expanding field of destruction. Han Wujin's final transmission went out to the entire galaxy. "Let this be recorded. The Velter Empire attacked human civilians. This is what happened to their Grand Fleet. Earth remembers its dead, and Earth protects its children." Of the 300 ships that had entered Earth's solar system, fewer than 20 escape pods survived to tell the tale. Supreme Commander Velthos was among the survivors, but only because the humans wanted him to carry their message back to the Velter Empire. As the escape pods limped away from Earth, Velthos looked back at what had been the greatest fleet in galactic history. The quantum cascade continued to expand. Fed by the debris of his ships, it would burn for centuries, a permanent reminder of what happened when humans stopped being civilized. The storm had been unleashed, and the galaxy would never be the same. Back on Earth, Kim Tae-ho stood in the memorial hall, where the names of the colony victims were inscribed in stone. Sujin was there, placing flowers beneath the name of every child who had died in her school. "Is it over?" she asked quietly. Kim Tae-ho looked up at the stars where the quantum cascade still burned like a new sun. "No, but they'll never attack our civilians again. The galaxy now knows what we're capable of when we stop holding back." The war was won, but at a cost that would echo through history. Humanity had revealed its true nature to the stars, and there would be no going back to the peaceful species they had tried to become.